Hi, you're watching Comic Talk. I'm Josh, and this is Drew, and this is our poll list episode for June 24th. Today we'll be talking about Daredevil number 16, Suicide Squad number 9, and Weirdworld number 1. So we'll start off here with Daredevil number 16. This was written by Wade with art by Chris Samney and color by Wilson.
So 16 apparently is starting out pretty close to the end of whatever's happening. They say in the next issue is going to be the finale. But it gives a good kind of... I liked how the first page there was like, this is what's happened so far. You don't always get that. Murdock has come out as Daredevil. He faked Foggy's death in a very public way to get him sort of, out of the public eye and stuff like that. People were coming after him. He moved to San Francisco and opened his own law practice and, was kind of doing that whole thing. I didn't quite get the bit about there's a shroud and there's an owl. And they're coming after him. I guess that's pretty much the long and the short of it.
Yeah. The owl, if you're familiar with the show, which I know you are, on Netflix,
right.
Owlsley is the owl.
Who was he?
The Weasley businessman that was always involved with Lady Crane and...
Oh,
yes.
Okay, yeah. I remember that guy. My employer. Yeah, that guy. This causes Murdock and Kingpin to, I guess not necessarily team up, but they have to cooperate to get rid of these guys. They've gotten far too powerful. They're tapping everybody's phones and everything, really. Everybody has their phones off and everything throughout the whole issue because of that. Murdock's proposition is that if Kingpin protects people like Foggy, his girlfriend, people that he obviously wants to be protected, then he's offering the death of Matt Murdock to the Kingpin. Obviously, he's not actually just going to let him kill him.
Maybe not so obviously. This is Daredevil.
Right.
Yeah.
The idea is he's going to get a new name that Fisk is going to choose for him. He's maybe going to get a new face, which again, Fisk could choose for him. Basically, just kind of the keys to the kingdom. And his logic is... Fisk has put so much money and time and manpower over the years into finding out just this one little secret about Matt Murdock, just his name, that's it. And then basically as soon as he got it, Murdock just went to the press and was like, hey, I'm Daredevil, just stole it away from him. So this way he kind of still gets what he paid for, essentially. Cuts to Foggy and Matt's girlfriend are on a boat. Foggy's waiting for a call from his oncologist, which he can't get because his phone's off because of the owl. And then there's an assassin on the boat, and then they're at the airport, and the Shroud kidnaps Julie Carpenter. I don't know who she is. And some guy named Jabula wants to trade Julie for her father to the Shroud. I didn't really understand what was happening there. It's probably something,
Yeah, well, it felt to me kind of like what's the word, a MacGuffin? Is that the word? It really doesn't... I didn't feel like knowing the particulars were that important.
It didn't necessarily matter, right?
Right.
And then it ends, the assassin on the boat with Foggy and Matt's girlfriend. Foggy's presumably dead on the floor. The assassin's on the phone with Fisk. So obviously he's not doing a very good job protecting them.
So first of all, with the way Daredevil run, for me, I fell off for almost a year on this, but previously the thing that I really truly loved about this series was the artwork. The fella by, he had a P name, Pascal Palotino or something like that. I don't know what his name really was, but he was doing some incredible stuff in that run. You read like the first 10 or so of
first
that
10 or 11 issues.
Right?
It was pretty good.
It was pretty incredible, sort of neo-retro or something.
Right,
It felt like an old comic done with a new style.
It was definitely classic, but it was clever about being classic.
Right. So in that regard, this kind of let me down a little bit, but I was expecting it, so it didn't hit me too hard. The artwork was pretty good. But there was one bit when Wilson is guiding Matt through his art gallery. He's he's walking him through, and Matt makes a point of saying, you know,
I have
whatever
no
these
idea.
Picassos or whatever these are, I can't see them. It pans out on the next page, and you see that every piece of art in this gallery that he's walked him into is of Matt being murdered. There are all these terrible like images, but they're mostly covers from like the last decade of Daredevil comics. Because, you know, the cover of Daredevil is always him being tortured, like so often. So it's sort of like an artistic representation of these artistic representations of the comics
being
themselves
tortured over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Wilson has assembled this gallery of these old Daredevil art covers as artwork, and he's parading Matt through them, knowing that he doesn't know that that's what they are.
Yeah.
Which I really loved that. That got a hearty belly laugh out of me when I saw it. But just the way that was constructed was very clever. You know, I really liked that a lot. So that was the high point. Just immediately, you know, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, yeah, you're not going to beat this in this issue.
Yeah, I kind of agree that the drawing themselves weren't anything spectacular. It did have clever moments, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I don't think, you know, you necessarily always have to try to step out of the box. You know, there's something to be said for working within constraints, you know, well-established boundaries and stuff like that, and still managing to kind of make it your own and, you know, carve out a name for yourself within that.
And interestingly, I don't think it falls that far from where Daredevil has moved artistically. It definitely has its own touch to it, and a little more held back, I guess. But it still feels like it belongs in that canon of the newer last few years of Daredevil. So not great, but pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty
some
cool.
Pretty good artwork. The writing, there was a lot of stuff in the writing that I really liked.
For me, that was the high point. Anytime there's a square box, I was just sold immediately.
Yeah, a lot of what Wade did here was really good. He really got that Matt Murdock vibe. You feel that sort of tortured Catholic.
Definitely.
You know, it was done really well. I really liked early on, there was a quote where he said, when Daredevil is speaking in monologue about Fisk and about making this deal, where he says, we're both going to learn what it's like to make a deal with the devil, which was an interesting juxtaposition. It does a good job of highlighting Murdoch's verbosity, his sort of cleverness with language. I liked that a lot.
Definitely.
And there were a lot of moments like that I really enjoyed with the writing.
Yeah, overall, A+. I mean, Mark Waid Daredevil is, I mean, it's always a home run. I think my main criticism of the 10 or 11 issues I read beforehand is that it seemed a bit villain of the week at the time. Like there wasn't, I like really long stories, you know, that just big Grant Morrison stuff, like it's fantastic. But I think this definitely, I mean, given that we're coming in towards the sort of end of the storyline, but it seems like these events have kind of been compounding for a while, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised if this is like the conclusion of something that started back in issue 1, you know, and here we are at 16, you know, just about to look towards the end, which I think is really great just for Waid in general. I think that's the way he should be writing. So I'm definitely going to be looking for some back issues of this. Yeah,
I like, it seems as the story progresses, if I'm not mistaken, this 16 isn't 16 from the beginning of the Waid run. This is Waid's second run.
They
of
rebooted
Daredevil.
it at some point.
Right, so we're 25, 30, somewhere in there of this whole thing. And it feels like that first run was him sort of pulling it back and starting over with the Daredevil mythos. Like, let's give him a new start. Let's do this again. He'll start out with the villain of the week. And it seems like it's progressing now and falling back into the tortured Matt. Like he cannot escape, you know, being this tortured Catholic soul. So I think it has a lot of potential. We jumped in the middle here, or near the end.
Near the end, actually. Yeah.
Season finale part 1 is next. So we're jumping in right at the end, but I felt comfortable with it. I didn't understand some of the characters, what was occurring in the airport scene near the end of this.
Right, yeah.
But at the same time, like I said, it didn't feel like we had to know what was going on there. And even that scene was written well. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Murdoch, especially explaining the problem of being blind in an airport.
Yeah, well,
he
his
doesn't know
particular
what's happening.
kind of blindness, because he normally has this echolocation thing, but it's just so loud and chaotic that he has no idea what's going on. It's all just...
Yeah, so that was also pretty cool. He did a good job in this of putting Matt in some different situations and really making the oddity of Matt's blindness interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I felt lost definitely at certain points, but I don't really think it kept me from enjoying any of it.
I didn't either.
I mean, even the scenes where I didn't know what was going on, and there was some little bit of dialogue or something that caught my attention, and yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, and finally, what could be a big spoiler, was that the death of Foggy at the end?
Possibly. And I mean, they apparently faked his death and then gave him cancer, and then now he's possibly dead again. So between those three things, you would think that he would finally die, this time. We'll see.
We'll see. All right, let's move on to Suicide Squad number 9. This one was written by Ryan with art by Briones and coloring by Blonde. So what happened in Suicide Squad?
I really love the opening 2 pages of this because it's Deadshot, he's got his mask off, and he's just kind of looking up at the stars and reflecting, thinking about his life and the highs and lows, and then it zooms out and he's in this town that's been absolutely just decimated, and there's a little refugee kid sitting next to him who you kind of put 2 and 2 together and figure out that that's the person that lit his cigarette in the first panel. I thought that was super clever. And then after that, it jumps back a little bit. Deadshot's being taken out of his cell at Belle Rev, and he's excited about it. Usually in the Suicide Squad stuff, they're usually not about these missions whatsoever.
Reluctant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Deadshot has been a steady member apparently for so long that he's taken it as the one thing he has to look forward to. Oh yeah, I get to go murder people now. God, I've been waiting for weeks. I'm getting the itch. Well, they go in and they find out that the villain that they're going to be facing this time is a sect of the League of Assassins that's broken off. Usually, when this sort of things happen, historically, the sect that breaks off is usually way more hardcore about their stuff, and such is the case here. They've already taken a lot of territory in the Middle East. They've done it in broad daylight. They've stolen American supervillain weapons, which is the real problem that they're having because they have no idea what they stole. It's pretty typical.
Oh no, it wasn't boomerangs, was it?
Right, yeah. Captain Boomerang was super concerned about his explosive boomerangs falling into the wrong hands. The mission that Walla gives them is to join them, find out what they have, find out as much as you can, and she actually says kill as many people as you can on the way out.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. So that's what they do. They show up in the Middle East. They get picked up by another American supervillain that's gone over there to join the new League of Assassins group. So they go into this building and they're getting ready to meet with the League of Assassins people. They get masked, taken to another room, and just brutally tortured. Just hit with golf clubs over and over again. There was golf clubs in several panels being used pretty creatively.
Power drills to the shoulder.
Yeah. Attempted brainwashing again, asking them, what do they believe in? What's their place in the world? Stuff like that. And it cuts to the next scene, and they're just out in the middle of the desert. And there's these 3 superheroes frozen. I don't remember the third one kind of looked like Blue Beetle.
Yeah, I'm not sure who they were, or if they were supposed to be anybody in particular.
Right. I think they probably just kind of looked like certain people. But they were frozen in the middle of the desert, and Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and Black Manta took baseball bats and just smashed the frozen superheroes, and that was that.
So the obvious thing here is the League is clearly DC's ISIS analog, I think. Mm-hmm. It seems to be that's what they're going for. They're extremists. They taken over the Middle East.
Yeah, the Middle East plug. Because there's, to my understanding, been some kind of ambiguity about where Nanda Parbat actually is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's in Asia, sometimes it's in kind of the Middle East. I guess generally the East is where it is, but yeah, definitely centering it in the Middle East is playing off of recent events and such.
Yeah. What do you think of that? Do you think that's well handled? Do you think it's a good idea, bad idea?
It helps it seem more relevant. I don't think the story would be any less valid if it took place in like Thailand or, something like that. I don't know. What do you think?
Seems a little ham-fisted.
You think so?
Maybe, or maybe just obvious or easy. It's easy to bumble it now, I think, because of it. Maybe a little bit of insensitivity. It doesn't bother me, but I can see how they, could end up having issue. Could maybe have some people get pretty upset about it. So what did you think of this in general?
I liked that it was still pretty funny in my opinion, even though that Harley wasn't in it super heavy. Normally she's the comic relief. And I think despite her being gone, they maintained the feel of like the Suicide Squad. It's humor and violence gratuitously. And I think they serve that well. I thought the, maybe from the perspective is coming on from a new reader, I thought they did a pretty good job with character development despite having three people obviously that they were trying to develop at the same time and the whole brainwashing plot point. So I thought that was handled pretty well.
Yeah, as a new reader myself, I felt pretty comfortable in it. I felt like this could have been a number one issue.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel and DC both have this thing now where they just seem to reboot everything at every 2 or 3 story arcs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad they didn't do that, but they could have.
Yeah.
They could have called this New Suicide Squad The League #1 or something, and it would have been totally comfortable in that format. So this is a good place to jump in if you are interested in it. The fact that they pulled out and just showed us 3 of the 6, I think that helped as well.
Definitely.
Didn't have to waste as much time getting everybody's little bit in. We could just focus really mostly on Deadshot.
Yeah, Deadshot's always been kind of the main protagonist of the Suicide Squad.
Okay. It seemed a little light on story to me. I didn't feel like we really progressed much. It felt like the first 5 minutes of Act 1.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I like the setup. I think it's interesting. If they don't just go next issue, now we're done, it's all solved and let's move on. I think they could squeeze quite a bit of interesting material out of them infiltrating the League and trying to prove themselves and figure things out. And they could have the recon team of the other 3. They could focus in on them for a few and show what they're doing to sort of get set up. But
not to mention it's a Suicide Squad comic, and nothing has gone wrong yet. So we got about 7 more bad turns before this arc is gonna go.
Okay, thanks for the warning.
Yeah.
I liked the writing. I especially liked the overall story arc that we're seeing. The dialogue and such was pretty standard fare. It felt pretty by the books. But I liked the overall ideas and the general feel of what's going on. However, I feel like the art was a little cold and lifeless to me. Like the torture scenes didn't hit me. I didn't feel as if I was concerned for their well-being. I don't
know that you're supposed to be though.
Okay.
Because again, it is. I mean, they're all villains.
Right, but it felt trite.
I could see that. The vibe I got for it was more fast.
Yeah.
It was bam, 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 bam. And in that context, there wasn't a lot to really focus on. It was just panel, 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 panel.
Yeah.
And I think if you read it like that, it's appropriate. There's not a lot of depth to them. There's a lot of liberties that they could have taken that they didn't. It's pretty much just red and black background, person being tortured and instrument of torture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seemed like they were just trying to get the point to you and not really trying to make you revel in the awfulness of being tortured and having a drill
put in your shoulder.
It just felt now here's the panel where the drill goes in, and it I didn't connect with it very well. I don't know if that's just the fault of the art or if that was a stylistic choice that they were making, but it's how I came out of it at the end.
I did think some of the paneling work was kind of clever, though. Like when it had it split up, like them being asked questions and then like them answering them, and it was in a little bit different order.
Yeah, I did like a lot of the layout work.
Yeah.
I'll agree there. It wasn't always super clever in how it was laid out, or not clever, but it wasn't anything new that I've never seen before, but I thought it was executed well. Let's go ahead and move on to Weirdworld number 1. So this was written by Jason Aaron with art by Del Mundo, and the coloring was done by Del Mundo and D'Alfonso.
It opens, and I have a note on here that says, if you open this book, you will buy it. That was the first thing I really noticed. Like, I couldn't even get to the dialogue before I had thumbed through the pages, and just the artwork is incredible.
Yeah.
And the palette is basically like watermelon.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of pink and red and green. I'm going to call him Aircon, because it sounds pretty G. He's the lord of the water lords, and he's somehow ended up, I assume through the whole Battle World thing, on this place called Weirdworld.
Because he's weird.
Yeah, because he's weird. Everything there is weird. He's from a place called Polemarchus.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and the whole thing is basically he's trying to get home. He's been on this Weirdworld place for he doesn't know how long, several days at least, and basically his entire days have just been walking around and murdering things. Because everything on this island is just trying to kill you. Like there's like dragons and ogres and squid beasts and just everything.
Yeah.
The island itself, we find out later, is suspended in midair.
Never-ending story-esque.
Never-ending story-esque, yeah. In light of all this, in light of days of looking for his home and not being able to find anything, not being any closer, just being exhausted by all the constant murdering and badassery, he's kind of... There's a lot of despair. There's a lot of despair in this guy. He's standing at the edge of the waterfall and thinking about committing suicide. I mean, what's he going to do? Just hang around and keep murdering things forever? I mean, he's not any closer to finding his home than he was, several days ago. So then when he's, like, just right at the edge of the waterfall about to step off, this dragon comes up and tries to kill him. And he's, like, super pissed off. 'Cause he's like, man, I'm just trying to, like, commit suicide. Can you just let me kill me without you trying to kill me every 5 seconds?
I have the quote here. Damn this place, can't even kill myself in peace.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
So he grabs a hold of this harness that's attached to the dragon, and there's these ogres kind of swinging from it. They're trying to catch the dragon. He's a bit thrown off because in his experience, ogres are pretty dumb in general. And, and these ones are like speaking to each other. They have semi-advanced weapons. Eventually they try to gun them out of the sky. They got some people on the ground. They need to get the dragon for their queen, who will do all sorts of unspeakable things. Aircon resolves that he will not give in to the world of monsters, even if he must become one. He's not going to let them kill him, let them get the best of him. And right as he sort of comes to this revelation, there's a fish on a string floating in the middle of the sky, and the dragon tries to eat it.
The dragon that he's riding.
The dragon that he's riding tries to eat it, and it pulls him underwater. So somebody was fishing from underwater into the sky in Weirdworld. And he gets to the bottom of the ocean, and there's a bunch of monkeys in scuba suits staring at him. And then it cuts to Morgan Le Fay, who we find out is the queen of the ogres, so to speak.
Queen Witch, I think.
Yeah, the Queen Witch. And she basically puts a bounty out on him, says we need to find out where this Polemarchus place is from. We need to take over that too, and we need to kill this guy. Do you know anything about Morgan Le Fay? Have you run into anything?
Not really.
Not really?
No, I don't know.
Because the way they announced it, it seemed like she was important to something.
She is.
Somewhere.
She's a big magic user in the Marvel Universe. First of all, like we were saying, the artwork in this is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this beautiful, soft, dreamlike
Watermelon.
Pastels and watercolors, and it's impossible to describe.
And even the pencil work, amongst all this amazing color work, it's just like so detailed and kind of scratchy, but very detailed in that scratchiness.
And there's no line work. At least not in the traditional sense. There's no black outlining on anything.
Oh, no, it's
all of the pencil work is colored pencil.
Mm-hmm.
When there is pencil work, it's very unique. It matches really well with the tone and feel.
Yeah.
And on that front, Aaron is killing it. This is incredibly well written. This reminds me of some of the best Conan, that philosophical barbarian sort of thing.
Right.
It's really cool stuff.
And see, I'm not usually into the sort of fantastical stuff. One of my friends recently let me borrow Birthright, which is another one that's come out recently that, you know, has all like the dragons and the barbarians and such. And, you know, that got super good reviews from like everybody. I just really wasn't into it at all. Just something about it, I thought it was boring. This, you know, may be the first piece of fantastical barbarian literature that I've ever really enjoyed.
Yeah, well, this was very unique.
Mm.
There's nothing else really like it that I've read.
Yeah.
It's.
And I mean, it makes a point of that. Like, it is Weirdworld, and they're going to throw you like
Weirdworld,
a million curveballs, but, you know, I don't necessarily feel like the genius behind it was the result of just a blank slate of, you know, if you want to fish somebody out of the air, you just go ahead, because it's Weirdworld, you know?
Yeah. When I heard the title and sort of took a look at what it was supposed to be, I was pretty dubious of the whole idea. It felt like it could easily fall into that trap that you're talking about there. Mm-hmm. But it does not. Not at all.
Yeah.
There are a lot of weird things. And they even make some humor. They make light of it in a really clever way. Like his map that he has. Did you take some time to study his map?
Yeah.
He's hand-drawn a map of everything that he's encountered, and it's pretty hilarious. There's a big Totoro-looking dude in the corner. It just has I know everything that he's written on him. The people on like a railroad cart, the little stick people, and it says they eat people. Like, just the whole place is just mapped out with all these bizarre things. It looks like a 7-year-old drew the map, which is fantastic because he's a barbarian, you know. He's not an artist. But it manages to be super weird without feeling like that's the point. You know, that just happens to be the setting, and something that otherwise is surprisingly grounded. His lament through the first half of the comic is literary in nature.
Yeah.
You know, it could exist without the art at all, and I would have still continued to read. If this was a novel,
yeah, definitely,
I would have read it. You know, I would have been hooked early. This might be, of everything I've read of Aaron's, this might actually be at the top now.
Wow.
Of my opinion of him. If I would to have a go-to of like, here's Jason Aaron, I would probably hand somebody that.
It's a pretty lofty statement. I mean, I don't necessarily. It's really good. I might give it a few more issues before I make that claim. But yeah, I was generally very impressed with it. And this is again number 2 of Jason Aaron titles where I was like, this is gonna be dumb. And it was super good. We had a lot of strong elements in this. What did you feel was the overall high point of this comic?
It's hard to say. It hit on all cylinders for me. I can't point to one single thing. The dialogue was fantastic. The monologues were great. There was humor. The art was wonderful. Even him, he wrote a dragon.
Yeah.
You know, it's just everything you could want from something fantasy oriented. He threw a broadsword and it went through a guy's head.
Yeah, that was cool.
You know.
Yeah, I guess for me, the high point in my mind was the inner monologue. But again, that's the first thing that I look for. You know, I think if art was the first thing that I looked for, that would definitely be the high point, like without any question. You know, I mean, it's all there.
All right, well, it looks like that wraps it up for the week for us. This was June 24th's poll list. Go ahead and comment down below if you have anything you'd like to add, anything you'd like us to talk about in the future. Also, make sure to like and subscribe and come back next week. Thanks a lot.